Well, it's great to be back with you on this Friday, and I welcome our special guest today, Randy Nunley, who is the chair of our finance committee. Welcome, Randy. We're
Hey,
glad you
David.
joined us today.
Glad to be here.
Super, Randy. You and Mary Jane and your sons are a part of our church. How did you get to First United Methodist Church of Winter Park?
Well, when we were looking for a new church home, one of the criteria, probably the top criteria, was a great music program.
Right.
We're very involved in our music ministry. At our last church, Mary Jane was a high school choir director for 15 years.
Right.
In Orange County Public Schools, and she was very involved in music ministry at our old church. So that was that, and a very good traditional service. We like what we call high church,
Mhm.
and so when we visited around, when we got to Winter Park, we noticed who the director was.
Right.
Michael Roberts, and Mike, and he and Mary Jane actually go back about 30 years. They knew each other back when Mary Jane was choir director at University High School, and Michael was director at Edgewater.
Yeah.
So when he saw us, he said, "Can you sing with us?" And we said, "Sure, we'll try it out." So we technically, I guess, we joined the choir before we joined the church.
Right. Well, another way that Michael continues to bless our family, what a great guy and great part of this church's legacy of 19 years. And it's so good to see you and Mary Jane up in the choir each Sunday, especially through this pandemic. The choir has just gone on its way to lift our spirits and help us connect to worship and to God week in and week out. So we thank you for your ministry for that.
Oh, thank you.
So finance committee has a number of responsibilities. It's a big deal in our church. Two that we want to update the church about tonight, pledges for 2021 and the budget formation for 2021. The two are actually interlinked. So let me go ahead and share a screen here of a latest on the pledges. And what we see here is we've reached about 58% of our goal of 1.4 million pledging, and about 55% of our pledging units. We kind of set two goals to reach through the year. We're on our way. We have recently just received a couple more pledges that we'll update you as we go forward. Tell me a little bit, Randy, about why pledging would be important, maybe to you personally, because I know you're a person of generosity, and then why it would be important to the church.
Well, first of all, pledging is important to the church and to the finance committee because it gives us an idea what to expect over the year, so we can help our ministries, all the ministries in the church, provide to our community. It gives us a structured order of what to expect. Personally, I'm a lifelong Methodist, and pledging, giving to the church is in my DNA. I have bits of memory when I was a young child, when my family lived in Charlottesville, Virginia. When my dad used to usher, I used to help count the money. So it's kind of been in my blood since I was a very young child. But over time, it's just, as Methodists, we're called to give back to the church through our presence, our prayers, our gifts, our witness, and our service.
Right.
And to me, finance and stewardship is a very important ministry.
Right.
For the church.
Right. I think of the passage where Jesus talks about who builds a tower without first counting the costs. And so what I hear you saying is that pledging allows me to kind of plan and be a good steward and to live out that sense of calling God has placed in my life. And then it's also something that helps our leadership be good stewards.
Yeah, correct. And if it's not, it's really for us to give to the church, to give to God, because again, I'm a firm believer they are gifts from God, and I feel obligated to give back.
You're spurred on. And for me personally, pledging gives me a way of making sure I give that best to God.
Correct.
If I leave it to happenstance, or when I think I'm rolling around, or when I remember, it's not the same level of quality of gift. And so it's really a tool, I think, your point to me, and then also to leadership. So I appreciate that. So let me bring up the second screen, which is our building of the 2021 budget. It's a work in progress. And just a couple of things, and then I'll ask you about it, but just you can see here across the top line, which is our pledges, and you'll see that we're forecast in this fourth category to reach 1.386 million. This is this year. And so thank you to all of you who have been so generous in helping us continue to be in ministry and to share the love and gospel of Jesus Christ. And then you'll see that we projected slightly less, and it actually 1.285. Why is that not 1.414 as our goal? Well, our 1.414 is the stretch goal of pledges. This is what we kind of conservatively put in to see if we can, that we think we'll get, and that would love to see that number go up as we get more pledges. It's not too late to pledge, is it?
No, and one thing that we need to remember is that pledging isn't just a November to December to January timeframe.
Right.
Really, stewardship is a year-round process,
Right.
and pledging helps with that, is part of that process.
Right. The second line on me here, see, is unpledged. That's the offering plate, and of course, it's significantly different than the budget because we weren't meeting for so long, and even now we're very limited, and only a very slight increase projected for next year over what we project will be actual offering plate this year. So what I see in these first two numbers, which is basically our offering, a fairly conservative approach in terms of projecting our income. And then as I move down to some of the other income, you'll see a big spike between the 2020 forecast under the Vibrant Family of 1.136 to 1.781. And the difference there is the income from the preschools. That the preschools were closed for 6 months. They didn't have the income, and as they're open now, they're running 80% capacity and moving north. They'll see that income spike. And so you'll see the difference of the forecast and the budget projection largely around the preschool differential. Now, if you move down towards the bottom of this chart, you'll see we have our staff parish, you have the different ministries, and then at the bottom our staff parish, that's our staffing budget, first without the preschools and then with the preschools. And what I point out is we've reduced the staffing budget by about $190,000 and the preschool budget by about $115,000. So a fairly significant reduction in staffing. And so that net of income to expenses, we're still upside down in our projection at this point of about $329,000. We are working to narrow that gap. That will not remain there. That's just the start of the conversation. You'll also notice here on the forecast of 2020, a $700,000 figure of net between income and expense. Remember, $500,000 of that will be made up by the PPP loan. So there's some pieces that give you where we're at. Again, thank you for the generosity of people that supported this ministry. And Randy, I'm wondering if you would just talk for a minute about your philosophy. The finance committee is responsible for assembling the budget. It's responsible for telling us really how much we would be able to spend as good stewards. The council kind of says, when you go to the store, we want these many cans of peas and this many cans of carrots, but the finance committee says you have this much money to spend. And so we need to listen to the finance team. How do you put the budget together? What are some of the pieces in your philosophy?
Well, we as a church, and this is pretty traditional across all churches I've and not-for-profits I worked with, is that we look at our ministries. What do we need to go out there? So for our church, we went to all the pillar leads heads to go through their items on how they want to provide their ministries to our community, and we start with that, and then the next part was to look at our giving, our income side of it,
right?
And we looked at how many pledging units we have. A pledging unit is a family that gives to the church. So that's one line item, and really the other significant line item is the unpledged amounts. Now that one is probably the hardest to determine. Traditionally, you want to go back and see how you did with plate giving over the last couple of years, but of course with the pandemic, that kind of methodology
Yeah.
doesn't really work. So
Been
it's
an unusual year. Are you trying to say
yes,
kind of disruption of pattern?
yes, and so we need to be somewhat conservative with that.
Right.
And that's why we have a slight increase to our forecast, because we actually had done pretty good. I was reading an article um, uh, online the other day about giving to the church, and I think there's a study out there of United Methodist churches that there has been a decrease, obviously, but really it hasn't been a significant decrease as many might have thought it was.
Right.
So, which tells me that people are still um, focused on the church and what we do as a connectional church,
Yeah.
and that's and giving is going. That's and I again I like to uh, thank everybody out there who has been giving it this past year during these challenging times. And now, one thing I do want to do, I like to challenge those, and there are some people who feel that they can't pledge because they don't know how much
Right.
they can do all the time. I would just say estimate how much you think you can give over the year and go ahead and pledge now. That way we have an idea
Right.
what you will give. And if you have to decrease your pledge, just contact the church administrator, and we can adjust. He can adjust your pledge accordingly.
Yeah.
But then if you want to give more, we'll
Yeah.
always accept that too.
Yeah, there's been some amazing stories of people that have gone beyond that and have really inspired us. I've been inspired through the season of the generosity of people who have really come in and said, this is a valuable thing for me to do. And I just appreciate your approach, Randy, because, I grew up in a tradition where pledging was kind of voodoo. It's like that
Mhm.
magical pledging, and there was a lot of shoulds and oughts to it. And really this idea that it helps me give my best to God, and it simply helps the church leaders plan. It's not magical. It's just part of being prudent and being a good steward. And because of that, there's nothing magical about saying, what, the year didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to. It turned out better or it didn't turn out. And so we're going to help plan that way. And so I just really appreciate your approach. And I would say that, I look at this and I'm actually very, very encouraged. And I'm encouraged by a number of things. That $700,000 projected differential, if you take away the 500,000 PP, about $200,000 out of a $4+ million budget and a pandemic COVID year. I'm really just, thanks be to God
Oh, yeah,
that
definitely.
that it's even that with that close, and that church's ministry has gone on and the people have been so generous. And I'm also very encouraged that the finance committee is taking a conservative approach. So we're not really just going out and blowing it wide open. And they put money back into the ministry budgets over what we expect to spend this year. So there's an increase in money for ministry. We're continuing to be good stewards with our staffing. So I'm just really thankful for the leadership that you and the finance committee is providing, and look forward to what God has in store for us through your stewardship. So tell me, as we kind of end up, why you decided to take on this, incredible, luxurious, high perk job of being the volunteer chair of the finance team in the church. That's not everybody would want to do that. So tell me why you agreed to do that.
Well, well, first of all, my Mary Jane would probably tell you that I can't say no, but there's one or two times I have said no
Yeah, yeah,
in the past, but actually rarely. No, but seriously, for me personally, it's one of the opportunity, really a unique opportunity for me to use my formal education
right,
for the church. I'm a CPA. I'm not, I was in public practice for about 18 years. Currently I'm an internal auditor with the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority, GOA,
right.
and we run Orlando International Airport and the Executive Airport. I'm a certified
Wow.
internal auditor, and I got a few other letters after my name professionally. So it's one of the things I can actually use my formal education for. Um, I've I've served on 3 or 4 not-for-profits here in Central
Right.
Florida. I've usually started as the finance chair or the treasurer, and it's just something I guess comes natural to me. Um, I've always wanted to be an accountant since I was 12 years old. So, and I'm besides being a Methodist nerd, I'm probably an accounting nerd too. So,
Yeah,
but it's something that I look at it as a true ministry. A lot of people say, "Oh, just
right.
numbers," but
Absolutely.
actually, it is a ministry. The stewardship again, which is really part of the finance process, is a year-round um, ministry that we um, do for the church, and
Absolutely.
it's not just we in on the finance committee; it's the entire our entire church family.
No, absolutely. I'll never say that I always dreamed of being an accountant, but I know just how powerful your ministry is, and it is. It's living out your calling, and I appreciate your heart into that and your service, and enjoy serving with you. One little trivia for folks as we end up today. I think you told me a story about the Orlando airport and how busy it is.
Yeah,
About one day in November or something like that. What was that little tidbit you gave us?
yeah. Well, obviously, since pandemic, it's been very quiet. Before the pandemic, we were averaging about 50 million passengers uh, a year, 12 months rolling year. Um, However, we decreased by 97%. But what happened, as the parks were opening, Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, people started wanting to come back to the parks. So November, we are actually the busiest airport in the country.
Wow.
Um, and over the Christmas holidays, when a lot of folks are taking their holidays to come to Florida and get away from the snow and enjoy the parks, we were in the top 2 or 3 in the country of busy airports.
Wow.
To kind of tell you the pandemic and how it really affected us, one day in like March or April, the all the large hub airports reported their passenger numbers for one
Right.
day.
Right.
The one day during the pandemic was would have been one day for us as one airport before the pandemic. So, but people are traveling.
Hmm.
OIA is done. We've done a lot to make the airport clean and safe.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah.
uh, but things are looking up.
Well, thank you, Randy. Thank you for your time with us tonight, and thank you for your leadership. And we'll look forward to what this 2021 brings us.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.